All right, and welcome to the second episode of Become Your Own Hero. My name is Sam Spataro, your host. And this is where I take the opportunity to share with you some experiences that I've had with anxiety and panic attacks, and how I found a way to turn that villain in me, that villain in us all, into a superpower. And by bringing about a new way to live your life, by using that which you don't understand, that which causes you pain, and using it as jet fuel to propel you to more purpose, meaning, joy, and wealth in this life, and the only one that you're going to ever live. All right, so today's topic is about anxiety and the experiences that we have with it. You know, I am 43 years old, and I'm pretty sure I've had anxiety most of my life, but it really didn't get out of control till about 8 years ago. For some of you who are new to this, 8 years ago I lost my best friend, was having another child, and started a new business venture that wasn't working out so great. And I am by natural tendency is to be a worrier. And so started to think the worst of everything. And then I can remember that exact day where I was in a restaurant, and a friend of mine mentioned a friend that we had who had a blood clot in his arm, and he had a stroke. And I started to think the worst, because at that time I had a fall in my workplace and my whole arm was black and blue. And I started to think to myself, what if that happens to me? And I can remember sitting at the table with all my family and friends, and all of a sudden, this wave of dread overcame me. My heart was pounding. I couldn't breathe. My mind was racing with crazy thoughts. And I excused myself to go to the washroom, as I didn't tell anybody, to try to get a hold of what was going on with me. And I remember getting back to the table and telling my wife, you know what, I'm going to go for a drive and just grab something. And I remember being in the car in complete panic that I was dying. And I remember rushing back and telling my dad that he needed to take me to the hospital. And right after that, we went to the hospital. They did the usual for any of you who have anxiety and experiences with panic attacks. You know, the usual, they hook you up to the EEG scans, they do your blood work, and everything comes back fine. Meanwhile, you know, something just ain't right. And so that was the start of my experience with anxiety as an adult. But if I can go back in time, when I was a child, my very first memory, vivid memory of my experiences with anxiety is when I was 13 years old. No, sorry, I was 11. And my uncle George died, which is my grandfather's oldest brother. And I remember going to the funeral and seeing everybody all around and crying. And I believe some might even passed out, if I'm not mistaken. And I remember playing tag with my younger cousins. And I ended up going in one of the other rooms, and then I realized that there was a dead body in there, and I got freaked out. I ran out and then just enjoyed everybody's company, and then we decided to leave. Now, I was in the back car at the time, and my dad and my grandfather in the front of the car, and all of a sudden I started to think about death. And this overwhelming dread overcame me. My throat was so tight that I couldn't breathe. And I remember vividly pulling the window down, trying to get air. And the one kicker is I didn't tell anybody. And so that is my earliest recollection of anxiety, I guess with death. And then after that, now that I'm a lot more knowledgeable about what anxiety is, I began to have a lot of other experiences with it. One is with sports. I would get anticipation anxiety. A lot of the times before games, you know, I'd get myself worked up about my performance, and, you know, my nerves would just get the best of me. And I can remember going to the washroom multiple times. I would be on edge until I would get out there and play, and then everything would be okay. And then there's the whole dating game, you know, for you guys out there who maybe you're starting a date and you got those jitters. Well, trust me, I can relate. I used to get really, really, really nervous And I can remember at times that I would be out at the movie theater or dinner, and I have to excuse myself because, my stomach would be rumbling and twisting and turning, and I'd be getting gassy, and, you know what comes next. And I would just get so worked up about it. And then as I got older, I decided, after I made the decision at the age of 24 that I would pursue masonry as a career choice because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I began that experience, that journey of learning a new career, a new trade. And I can remember after about 4 years of working for my uncle, I ended up getting an opportunity to work for another company. I ended up running it. And it was a fantastic job. It was a fantastic business, and the owner was amazing. But it got to the point where there was a lot of uncertainty about what he was going to be doing in the future. He's talking about closing up. He wasn't sure if he was going to get out and go do something else. And at the time, a couple of my friends were actually working with the company. And we decided, why don't we start our own thing up? And I remember at the time vividly, I just built a brand new home with my wife. We had our very first child. And here I am talking about starting my own business. And I can remember the anxiety and the what if thoughts that were just plaguing me daily. And then I just decided on a leap of faith to go through with it. And trust me, I had many bouts of anxiety along the way where I wasn't getting paid on time, dealing with employees, people not showing up, people fighting on the job. The worst one, especially in my industry, is you finish a job, you've had one lined up, and there's a delay. And all of a sudden you've got 10, 20 people relying on you for work. And so I would just get so caught up in beating myself up and worrying. I can remember waking up in the middle of the night thinking about, what I'm supposed to do next for tomorrow. How am I going to make sure people have work? Is everything going to go right? Is the stuff going to be there? And that just kept going on and on for years, probably into my late 30s. Yeah, I'm going to probably say about 39 years old was where I pretty much almost every night would wake up in the middle of the night thinking about work or what I had to do the next day, and all those what if worrisome thoughts that keep you up at night. And then, I had the experience at the age of 37 when I lost my best friend. Let me tell you, that was the hardest thing I've ever experienced in my life. I come from a very big Italian family. I mean, hundreds of people. My great-grandmother on my father's side, I believe, had 18 kids. And my great-grandmother on my grandmother's side had 12 kids. And this kind of doesn't go with this storyline at all, but 5 of the sisters and 5 of the brothers from both families ended up marrying each other. And so we just became really, really, really close. And so along the way in my life, from a very early age, my father and family had brought me to funerals because out of respect and many other things, and trust me, it wasn't comfortable going to these things, but I started at a very young age. So I've had a lot of experiences with death and funerals. It was pretty comfortable with it. And I would say I was really comfortable with the fact that my friend died in the context of the whole arrangement, the funerals, and all that stuff that goes on. But what I wasn't prepared for afterwards was all the dread that I would experience with anxiety. And so for a lot of you who might be middle-aged, around 37 to 40, sometimes we hit that epiphany phase where we realize maybe we're not where we should be or need to be, or maybe we're not on our purpose or doing something that, really makes us feel alive. And so it just kind of hit at that time where I was 37, my best friend died, having another kid, a new business venture, and the whole world was colliding. And all of a sudden, I just got over-consumed with anxiety to the point where it turned into anxiety disorder, panic attacks for days on end for a minimum of 3 years. Like, I went from 185 pounds down to 150 pounds. I look like a skeleton. I'm 6'1", so you can imagine that. my mind constantly every night waking up in panic in the middle of the night. Every day going to the work was like dread following me everywhere. I couldn't find any joy and peace. All because, as I look back now, I didn't really take the time to deal with the loss of my friend, the emotional part of it, and how that is affecting me. And I would say, if I could look back now, the one thing I take from the whole experience with losing my best friend is I never took the time to really deal with the thoughts that I was having, the worry, the what if thoughts about when's my time? What would that look like if I left my family at a very young age? I'm not where I want to be. I'm not doing the things or the thing that I love. And what if my time comes up before I get that opportunity? And I started to constantly think about my kids and my wife and what their life would look like if my life ended early. And this cycle just continued. And I'm going to say, looking back now that I'm 43 years old and journaling and logging a lot of the things that have happened in my life that have to do with anxiety. And I think really the one key thing that I find that shapes our experiences in life isn't necessarily what happens to us, but the beliefs that we create. And I know a lot of the times, when it comes to our experiences, by nature and by being human, we get caught up into a lot of the, how could this happen? Why me? Why now? Too young? So many different variables that we can play with. But really and truly, nobody gets a deck of cards with the cards faced up, knowing that they can strategically pick the cards that they want to win the game the best. We're kind of dealt with them down, and as we flip them up as we have experiences in life, we got to kind of learn to deal with them in the best way that we can. And a lot of the times we don't find out where we are intelligently, empathetically, with gratitude, our self-esteem, our self-confidence, our self-compassion and kindness, until we kind of have an experience that pushes us to the point where we're tested. And so I truly believe that as I reflect in my life and all the experiences that I've had with anxiety, and it's this: the majority of people, I believe, that have anxiety have a few things in common. And one, they always see the worst before they see the best. The second thing is, we are hesitant to take risks. And we really, really focus on the one human need of certainty, the things that we can control, as it makes us feel grounded. And the third thing is this: what your life should be, what it should look like, where you would like to be, the things you would like to think, how you would like to perceive and experience things. But literally, you are holding, and I was holding myself back. And so, if there's one takeaway that I want to share with you, when it comes to experiences with anxiety, is to just take a pause. Take a pause, really connect to your experience, really connect to what you're feeling, really connect to what your body is going through, the common thoughts that are running through your head. And then the second thing I want you to do is learn to become your own best friend. There is nothing worse than having anxiety. But one of the most common traits of people with anxiety is they're their own worst enemy, notorious for beating themselves up. And trust me, I've done this a lot and still do at times. And so it's very important that you be conscious and aware of what you do when you have an experience. And the second thing, obviously, is who you're going to become How are you going to support yourself? Who should you be? If it was your child or your companion or a friend or a family member who's going through what you're going through, what advice would you give them? And learn to be that for you. And the third thing is, when it comes to experiences with anxiety, I want you to understand is that anxiety is not a curse. What makes it a curse is the belief that it is. One thing I learned through my journey in anxiety, and that I was taught from my naturopathic doctors that had a huge part in helping me to get to where I am today, is that in science there's a thing called neuroplasticity. And the ability to be able to reshape our brains by making new connections, new nerve endings, so that we can find new ways to perceive the world, to deal with things, change our beliefs, the things that we value, etc. But what's most important is that you must get very clear on what you want to see when you're having that experience. Meaning, if I don't want to suffer, how do I have to see this? Being intelligent about it. And if you don't want to have pain, how must you move through this? And how do you embrace your anxiety to turn it into a superpower as a component of you to make you the best you? So I'm going to end on that. For you who might be watching this, and maybe you've just started your journey with anxiety, maybe you've had it for many years,